Greetings, everyone. I'm Tim Anderson, aka Renfail, and welcome to the latest version of Mondays in MMORPGs. This is, I guess, technically what I'm calling the third season. I've done this a few times in the past, but this time around I'm joined by some new co hosts. If you guys want to jump in and introduce yourselves.
I am Jesse. I am the co-founder of Defend the Night. Just here to talk about my love for MMORPGs. Nice to meet you guys.
I'm Leksur. I am lead designer for Defend the Night. Also on a host of other podcasts. Everyone will know me as the loudmouth guy. Glad
Yeah,
to be here.
I know that I've been watching the Looking for More podcast recently, so I know you're on that show as well. Do you do any other ones, Jesse, or is it just
No,
y-
just this one. Yep,
oh, we're
just
we're
this one. So
we've got
so
you.
you're breaking me in. Yeah.
Yeah, the virgin vodcaster podcaster here. Cool. All
Yeah.
right.
Just for Defend the Night. So this is new for me. So
That's not true. You
no
ran a
no PC.
radio podcast.
Yes, that was a while ago. I did have a radio podcast in 2019 called Pixel Debauchery
Ooh,
for Pantheon. I guess I was supporting them at the time. So
cool.
that was cool.
All right. Well, this show, for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, during the previous couple of seasons, we've talked about a whole range of different topics related to MMORPGs. Here in this version, we're doing the same thing again, but it's nice to get some fresh perspective because it's been a couple of years since the last time I was here talking about MMORPGs, and the pandemic and COVID, things have changed a lot. And we're going to be talking about a lot of that stuff in the upcoming episodes. But for today's episode, I wanted to just we're going to do a roundtable, get to know everybody a little bit more since you're going to be seeing a lot of us over the next couple few months at least, and talk about, our love for MMORPGs, how we got started playing, how that led us to the projects that we're working on now, so on and so forth. And I'm not going to go first. I figured I would let Jesse, you go first, then I'll go second, and then I
Oh,
can
okay.
throw you into the fire since you're the new guy.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, MMORPGs for me was just so mind opening for me. Before that, I was playing point and click games with Sierra online adventure games like
Mm.
King's Quest and that was Police Quest, I think it was called. Was is that
Yeah,
one
Police
too?
Quest, yeah.
Yeah, Police Quest. And I was involved with some of the Leisure Suit Larry because when my parents would go to sleep at night, I would turn that on because I was too young for that kind of game at that time. You guys remember that?
Yes, I do.
Oh
I
yes.
played
Leisure
all the
Suit
Sierra
Larry?
games. Freddy
Oh
Farkas,
man,
Frontier Pharmacist, all the Space Quest, King Quest, Quest for
it,
Glory games.
those really got me involved. Duke Nukem, I think, was a big one for me. It opened my eyes up. I had the Atari and the Intel Vision console games early on, but my real love is the PC games. The when Sierra Online came out with their catalog of games, that was just blew my mind. But from there, I mean, I joined the service, the U.S. Air Force, and from there, I was in a break room one time, and these guys were talking about uh, D and D, D&D game. I thought it was a D&D, paper book game, but no, it was an actual video game that had RPG elements in it, like the old D&D paperback games. So I just overheard them, and then I wrote it down. They said it was called Everquest. So my computer at the time couldn't run it. I think it was back in 1999. Uh, so I had to buy a new computer to run this game. But they talked about it every day. So I was like, yeah, there's something to this. So I went out and I think it was like Circuit City. You guys remember Circuit City?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Circuit City, that's where I got my first computer, and it was barely able to run it. That's my first personal computer. My parents had a computer and everything, but this was my first. I was about 19 years old, and I think it was what was the computer? I think it was an E machine, something like that. Something. Remember those? The cheapest one you could
Yeah.
get, but you could put other cards into it to make it a little bit more beefier. So I tried to get online with that, but it was really I'd get online and then it kicked me off. So I ended up buying another computer from online source that they actually shipped it out to me. and that worked great because I could pick out what kind of components I wanted in it. So I mean, but the thing about this was it when I did get online, I could play with anybody, and for me that was just a shocker because all these other games that I played were just single player, RPG games, and it just blew me away. I just was infatuated with EverQuest. But I'll stop talking and let somebody else tell me about their story.
I will go next. Mine is so I grew up in a household where my parents were fairly anti video game. I will never forget, and my younger brother Joey, he's 13 years younger than me, so he was like the accident baby. He never
Mm-hmm.
believed me when I told him that, oh yeah, one Christmas our grandma got us a Nintendo, like late 80s, somewhere in there. And my grandma used to record on VHS like all the Christmas parties. And my my dad was not happy that my grandma bought a console for us, and they were very protective of us not spending a lot of time on video games. But for a weird reason, um, the console was kind of no, but on the PC, my dad had a PC for his construction business. He did all his accounting on it, and I was allowed to have PC games, and I would get allotted time per week to play. And I remember, I think one of the first games I can remember playing was King's Quest 6, and Quest for Glory 1 around the same time. And those were like kids' games, family games, and so those were kind of approved by my parents. And so I was allowed to play those games, and I really grew up on Sierra. And then we got into, the LucasArts games during the late 80s into the early 90s. And once I got into King's Quest and those games, that got me into like, oh, then there's Zork and the Adventures of Zork, which is text based, but then it went to graphics. And then, you know, in the 90s, that's when they started doing like all of the really interesting, like first live action games and stuff. Um, I uh, ended up, for various reasons or another, living on my own before I was 16. And having friends who had PCs and consoles and stuff, I was able to start playing a lot more then. And then by the time I got to 99, I still didn't own a personal computer, but I did have consoles. But I went to, so the very first ever Star Wars festival, Star Wars Celebration, I think is what they're called, was in Denver, Colorado. And I lived just north of Denver, Colorado. And so a buddy of mine went because we were huge Star Wars nerds. Um, and we went to the Star Wars festival, and we were standing in line for the toy store, and because I was going to go, I blew a bunch of money on Legos and other stuff. And in line, I got to talk with these guys behind me. We were talking about D&D, and then we started talking about the Star Wars role-playing game. And then they told me about this new game that had just come out like a month or two before, that was like D&D online. And they were explaining to me, like, basically they explained the scenario from the common lands, where there's like a hill giant walking through the common lands and a griffin, and they were talking about this, hill giant, and then all these like wizards and 30 40 people got together to take down this hill giant. Wizards are calling lightning down from the sky, and I was like, oh my god, I gotta check this game out. And finished up the celebration, went home. Similar to you, Jesse, I literally went out, bought the game, and then I went and bought a computer to play the game. And I spent way more than a 19-year-old kid should have spent on a computer. And I went and bought. Um, it was a gateway all-in-one, so it was just like the monitor with a disk drive on the side, and just like it didn't even have a dedicated graphics card. It had like the internal chip or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But it was enough to run the game. And then I just had dial-up to that point. And then I went out, and I was lucky enough to live in a place in Colorado where um, high-speed internet was available through AT&T. So I went and got a cable connection as well, and that fully cemented my um, my beginning steps into that world. And I had already been playing, like I had done like Shadows of Eusebius with Sierra, but the cost to play that at the time, because once you got through the free demo, it was like, oh, you want to keep playing this online with your friends, it's like per minute or per hour or whatever it is, and the costs were astronomical. So then being able to pay like $50 a month or whatever it was for a cable internet connection, and then a $15 a month subscription was like, this is doable. And the reason for me why I got so heavy into that game was, I didn't have a lot of friends. I was not a very um, my environment at that time. I was 19, working a job that I absolutely hated. Not great relationships with my my dad, but I still worked for him because the only thing I knew how to do was ceramic tile and natural stone. So I was a third generation kid in a pre-internet era, being 19 years old, no college education, high school dropout, all this other stuff. That was my outlet because I hated my day job. I did it just to pay the bills, but then I would come home and that was my outlet to plug in and forget about the job that I hated and everything else. And I would come home, get home, take a shower, sit down, and I would log in at like, 6 o'clock or whatever, and then I would play until like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock every single night. And then weekends, forget about it. Weekends was like, I'll do grocery shopping and laundry, but apart from that, I'm online playing from like 6 in the morning until midnight on like Saturday and Sunday. Um, so EverQuest for me was it was a lot of fun and I loved it because it gave me the social interaction that I was craving and just didn't have in my life at the time. But it also gave me an escape from the world that I didn't really appreciate and didn't enjoy at the time. Um, and for a long time, it was just, I when I started out, it was, I got like a weekend, and the story that I have is that basically I had a ranger, wood elf ranger, and I had been running around Kelethin and Crushbone, got him to like level 9, had just spent all my money to buy chain mail and all this other stuff. And I'm talking to people in game, and they're like, "No, you ought to go check out this place on the other side of the world. It's over by this place called Kinos and this Blackborough, And I'm like, that sounds cool. And I'm looking at the world map because back then we didn't have in-game maps or anything. It was literally you had the world map that came with the game. And so it was like, okay, I'm here. How do I get there? And this guy literally explained to me how to. And so I wrote down in a notebook how to get there. And so I took off and I ran through Kelethin. I got the butcher block and I made it to the docks and I got on the boat and made it across to Freeport. And then I got over into the Commonlands and ran through the Commonlands. And I got to Kithakor and everyone's standing at the zone line. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, it's nighttime. You can't go into Kithakor. And that's when I found out that at nighttime, Kithakor turns into the undead. And then finally, daytime comes through. I run through and I get to the pass, Highhold Pass, and I run in and I'm running up the ramp and I run into a camp of orcs and dead. Loading, please wait. And there I go, appearing back in Kelethin, completely naked, no one having ever told me about binding my character anywhere, and all my gear was back after this like epic 12-hour adventure, and I was just crushed, like crushed.
How many people have done that before though? I mean,
Right.
I've done it. Oh, it's
So
just heartbreaking.
then I met these two guys who were role playing, a dwarf and a barbarian, a dwarf cleric and a barbarian shaman, and they were like, "Why are you hanging out? Where's your gear?" And I was like, they were role playing, so I role played back and got into their guild. They made me a set of banded armor, and within 2 weeks, I was an officer in the guild, and within 2 months, we were doing raids, and that was like, I'm in for the long haul, and that was 22 years ago now. So yeah, MMORPGs have always held a big spot in my life. They're not the only genre that I love, but it's definitely over the years it's been my primary social outlet, and especially now because we have video, so it's really easy to hang out with people you've never met before and have video interaction. And who cares if you've never met physically? It's like you can get on a video chat, get on voice chat, hang out, know these people, you know their names, you know their wives, you know their dogs, you know their kids. And now with streamers, people are more open to just that's the way the world operates now. But 20 years ago, it was weird if you only had friends online, and people often looked at you as like you were some sort of weird social freak. And it was like, no, I just prefer to hang out online as opposed to go hang out in a bar or go to a strip club or, you know, whatever that all your buddies in construction are doing. Because construction guys typically don't do stuff that I would consider to be fun. And they're after hours. It's, you know, man stuff. And I was like, no, I'm gonna go home and play video games. They're like, ew, nerd. And now nerds are cool. And it's a weird social shift that's happened in the last 20 years.
What, you don't like football? Huh?
You don't like cars? What's wrong with you?
But yeah,
I
you
guess
have,
I guess that leaves me, and it's. Has anyone else noticed that it seems to have a progression here with the stories?
yeah,
Because Mine's the polar opposite of Jesse's, but very similar to Renfale's. I grew up in a very abusive household. Was on my own at the age of 14, basically paying a landlord cash so that I can live in an unused apartment in a black neighborhood, which means I still got, my beat downs on a regular basis. But when EverQuest came around, I had already tried Ultima Online and it just didn't take for whatever reason. But up until then, I had played all the Sierra games, I played them all. My first computer, I rummaged out of a dumpster, just bits and pieces from like an office upgrading, and just happened to teach myself how to build them and all that other stuff. But by the time it came around, I was kind of an alcoholic. I was a substance abuser. I was headed down a really bad path very quickly. And I never had any friends. All my family didn't want anything to do with me. So EverQuest gave me an outlet to a world where I'm not me. I can be whatever I want, whoever I want, and nothing follows me there. Unfortunately, for the first couple of years, that turned out to be my major outlet. I ended up being a bit of a tyrant in a raiding guild. Caused way more problems than I solved. But it was the beginning of getting my head on straight, because I wasn't taking things out in the real world. I was taking it out online instead. And by the time I had retired from that section of my online career, I started on a new server from scratch because I met some friends who were like, "Oh, let's play this game." And by this time, Kunark and all that was out.
Kunark.
Actually, I think it was pretty close to Planes of Power release, probably a couple months off from it. And I was like, yeah, that looks cool. I'll play. Meanwhile, not telling them I had a, max level necromancer with about a million and a half plat on him. But at that time, since I kind of got out all my angst and all my anger, I finally got a chance to really talk and connect to people, which gave me a support group for PTSD, fighting my addictions, dealing with my anger issues in a more healthy way. Without EverQuest, I can safely say I would not be here today, because when I got that EverQuest disc, I was very close to ending it. But because of EverQuest, I have lifelong friends that I still talk to today, even though we don't play any game. We haven't played a game together in years. I met my wife on a Vox raid in EverQuest. I think I met her in 2002, got married in 2012. And through her, I kind of got adopted by her family. So now I have a family. I don't have any kids, but I have a nephew that lives about 10 minutes away. And I literally told my brother-in-law a couple of weeks ago that being an uncle is as close to a father I'll ever get. But the thing is, I'm quite happy with that.
Can I now, a quick question too? How old is your nephew?
He's 12 now.
Okay. Does he play by any chance?
He plays a lot of games, but he doesn't play MMORPGs. He plays, believe it or not, GTA 5. But me and him had a long discussion about the content in that game and stuff like that. Like, I have a massive swearing problem. I know I do, but I had a talk with him and told him that just because I do it, I know it's wrong. But I've been doing it for so long, it's hard for me to stop. Don't be like me in this respect, please. And he's been doing really well with that, surprisingly. But ever since I left EverQuest, I've been jumping around to games, just probably like most people. Mm-hmm. I've played every major one out there. I've been through the ups and downs of WoW and Anarchy Online. Yes, even Elder Scrolls Online, which I have a massive beef with. And I'm kind of stuck in a weird limbo right now, and I'm sure a lot of people can actually relate to this, where I so desperately want to love another MMO the way that I loved EverQuest, and it's not chasing the nostalgia dragon or anything like that. It's just I want to love the game. I want to love the the environment. I want to love the people in it. But there's always something that escalates very quickly when a new game is released that makes me want to leave it. You take like World of Warcraft when Wrath of the Lich King came around, which is when I retired from that. The community had shifted from being, moderately social to if you don't have all these achievements, get GTFO
Yeah. You don't have best in
on
slot. Piss off.
right on an entry level raid where you're going to get this stuff. It's so I don't. I'm not happy where MMOs are today, but I would like to stick around to try and change it.
So that's a good segue point right there, because I was gonna kind of go into the next step, which is or the next question I should say, which is, I think all three of us here at this table started off with a passion for MMORPGs, and that led to us chasing that dragon, not necessarily finding it, and deciding that if we weren't gonna find it, then we were gonna try to create our own version of that. Because I know with both of you, you're both working on Defend the Night, which is a dark. Can I call it gothic? Is like a dark gothic or just a
Dark
dark fantasy?
fantasy, dark
I
fantasy.
I had to
Yeah,
make sure, I'm not. So it's a
because
dark.
because yeah, because the thing about Defend the Night is it's got the dark elements, but there's also like high fantasy in it.
Sure.
But it's just we like to, you know, just a little bit more edgier with the dark fantasy.
Yeah. So I mean, that led you guys to getting involved with that project and kind of kicking that off the ground and building it into something better. And then from my perspective, founding Stormhaven Studios and then spending 6.5 years working on the Saga of Leucemia, as the creative director and writing the book series. Because I mean, I started that back in '99 was when I created the D&D campaign, and then built that up over 15 years or so. So in all of our cases, we took the love that we had for the genre and haven't necessarily seen it in any of the games we've played since those first few years of MMORPGs, and decided to do something about it in terms of creating our own independent versions of those. And it's an interesting point, because I know a lot of people will like to point at like different things that they say as to why they haven't been able to find that same feeling. I mean, I've come close. I mean, I still play. There's one game that I've played over the years since it came out, which is Lord of the Rings Online. That's as close as I've gotten to a game, and I don't like all of it, but I do like enough of it that I can come back to it every single year and play it and get great enjoyment out of it. And I typically play it for usually about 3-4 months every single year, and I've done that religiously since it came out. But I don't think I've had a main MMORPG since 2009. So my history a little bit, I did 7 years of EverQuest 1 up until the Gates of Discord expansion, and then EverQuest 2 came out, and I just made the transition. Was like, this looks fun, new graphics, everything else, and I went into EverQuest 2, and then I spent the next, you know, however many years, like another 6 or 7 years in EverQuest 2, doing the same routine, becoming the leader of a raid guild and raiding 3 times a week, 4 times a week, and just doing that nonstop. But by the time I wrapped up EverQuest 2 around 2009, I don't think, other than a brief stint when World of Warcraft Classic came out, because I had never played Warcraft, so when Classic came out with the Saga of Leucemia community, it was like, let's go do this, and everybody was on board, and so we pre-formed a guild, had like 75 people, and we jumped in, and I spent 7 months playing World of Warcraft Classic. But even after 7 months, I literally just got to the point where I was like, there's so many other games to play. Like, I want to go off and experience other worlds and play other things. So I don't know if that's necessarily the case these days, where, at least for me personally, in terms of my love for MMORPGs and not being able to find the one, there's a part of me that wonders if it's just because there's so much stuff out there now. I want to try it all. It's like, not all, but I do like to play games, and so I do tend to try lots of different things. I think you were saying before the show, Jesse, like you're very picky about your games.
Well, the thing for me is it has to have the challenge. If it's easy, if it's too easy for me, I'm out. Um, I think like we will talk about EverQuest 2. I played EverQuest 1, and then when EverQuest 2 came out, it didn't play like EverQuest 1. I mean, it didn't have the same gemstones settings, and all the mobs were linked together, and it just didn't. It played more like World of Warcraft does. So I was out. I mean, and I am really picky. I'll like 2 weeks I'll spend with a game, and then I'm out, just because it doesn't have the same aesthetics as EverQuest. But I love the EverQuest 2 had the great graphics, uh, really really compelling magic systems, but I just couldn't get into it for whatever reason it was. So I went back to EverQuest 1, and the next time I left EverQuest 1 was Warhammer Online. Love that game, but it took a long time for me to get away from EverQuest 1.
I don't think I ever played Warhammer.
It's fun. It's one of those ones where if you bring in a friend or two that's rather into PvP, you'll have yourself a much better time.
I mean, I dabbled with other games, like I went to Shadowbane for a while. They had the point and click to move. It kind of ate at me, but I like that game too. But it just there's always some little thing that wasn't like EverQuest that really killed it for me. So yeah, I'm really picky
Did
with that
either
stuff.
of you ever play Guild Wars 1?
Hmm.
Yep. Oh yeah.
I always thought that one, I enjoyed that game because you could play it with friends, but you could also take the companion, like the NPC companions who were never as good as real people, but you could still take them along with you. And it was a weird, like,
Mhm.
hybrid of MMORPG with, like, single player,
I almost want to
game.
say it was like one of the first MMOs that was more lobby based
Hmm.
because you would go to a town
Hmm.
which was just your hub and that's your lobby. You just have a visual lobby versus the old timer lobby where you just see people's names in a list, and then you go and run a mission. You come back up.
They
But
actually had Guild Wars in that game.
yeah,
So Guild
Yeah.
Wars 2 came out, and there's no wars. And I was like, what? Why is this
No.
called
And it was such a different game too. Guild Wars 2 was so different. Um,
yeah.
speaking on all these other games, obviously it sounds like all three of us have that love for EverQuest as like the first big MMORPG. I mean, do any others stand out to you over the course of the years as games that you think have kind of they haven't reached the pinnacle of replacing EverQuest, but they've been good enough that you've spent significant amounts of time and gotten enjoyment out of them?
Anarchy Online.
That was a sci-fi one, wasn't it? I never played it,
Yeah.
but I
If
vaguely
if
remember it.
if Funcom actually made it like properly free to play, because it's free to play, but the only good expansions are locked away behind a sub. But if they ever released those expansions, I would be there right now.
It's still
Even those
around. I didn't
old,
realize it was still.
oh yeah, even those terrible angular blocky characters and all.
Mhm.
I th-
Yeah,
No,
for me it was Warhammer. Warhammer Online was a good one. Not as good as EverQuest, but it was one of the ones that really captivated me uh, enough to spend a lot of time in. But I also like RTS ones like Age of Empires 2, which was that game. I still play that today. So uh, that's the only thing I got even close to finding that niche to replace EverQuest.
Yeah, I think for me it's definitely been Lord of the Rings Online.
Mm.
And I think the thing that draws me to that game, it's so different these days though, because my brother and I were actually reminiscing about this the other day, because when that game first came out, it was 2007 maybe. And when it was a very much a group-based game when it came out. Like you had to group for all of the book quests to complete the epic storyline. You had to group for dungeons. It was all group-based. And then by the time it got to like 2010, 2011, when they made the switch to free to play, they completely changed the game. And now it's very much a solo. It's a solo RPG that allows you to do group content if you want to, but you don't have to if you don't want to. Like they've revamped everything to where like all the old book quests, like if you go into the zone and you don't have someone with you, like your party with you, you get like this buff which gives you like 50,000 hit points, and it's not necessarily challenging, but you can complete the story. Whereas if you go in with your friends and you're level appropriate, it's still hard as hell. But I think the thing that I've really loved about that game that's kept me coming back over the years is just because I like the lore of Middle Earth so much. Um, I often question myself. It's like if the lore wasn't there, would I still be playing that game? Like if it wasn't about Middle Earth, would I still give a shit? Because there are plenty of other games that have, in-depth lore. I look at World of Warcraft and as an example, they have a ton of lore. They've done novels. They've done, they've got the first three Warcraft games before they even got to World of Warcraft. Um, but for some reason, Warcraft, I've tried retail 3 times and it never been able to make it more than like 2 weeks. It's just always been like I make it 2 weeks in and it's like I'm literally just grinding quest hub to quest hub to quest hub. And after I've
It's
done
a little too on rails.
Yeah, after I've done like 50 fetch quests or kill these to get 10 teeth, I'm like, fuck, I can't take this anymore. It's like uninstall. I'm gonna go try something else.
Yeah, I'm the same with that. I don't like any games that are on rails. I can't deal with it. I like to have the freedom to do what I want. If I want to do a quest, I'll do that quest, but it's not gonna it's not gonna help me out. It's not gonna be the only way to play the game. I felt like when I played World of Warcraft early on, that's how it was for me. A lot of people say it's not like that, but for me, I felt like I was on the straight, narrow rail, and if I moved off of it, I wouldn't get I wouldn't be as effective. So I think that was definitely a downfall for me. I like the freedom, and that's what MMOs for me is all about. Is you don't have to go the what do they call it, the path always traveled. You can go somewhere else. Go somewhere that's not been found before. I think even in EverQuest, there's quests that aren't even completed yet because there's so
No,
many
that,
ways to do things.
they're ever since Project 99, that's been pretty much handled.
Has it? Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think
So
up
I mean,
until a certain point, yeah.
uh, but yeah, for me, it's just that total freedom to do whatever the hell you want to. I think it's the same way with some RTSs too. You don't have to build this way or build that way. You can do your own. You can do your own thing.
Yeah, I
That's
think
the part.
that's why I'm so critical when people ask me about these newer MMOs. Is I see it from a uh, design perspective,
Mhm.
and I look at it like, why would you tell them you have to do this? I hate it when people tell me how to do things or what to do when in real life. Why would I let a game do it? It's like, okay, so I love PlanetSide 2. It's a fun little game. I love PlanetSide 1. But I can only play it when I'm in the mood to PvP because that's the only thing you can do. And then, there's a lot of other games that are like, they have a very specific style of gameplay and they force you to do that, even though they offer other things like PvP or PvE and questing. With World of Warcraft, they force me to go from here to here to here to here to here. It's progression by numbers, basically, and it's like, why can't I forge my own path? In EverQuest, they're like, here's a rusty sword, good luck to you. But the design of that game made it obvious where you needed to go, because if you walked into Unrest at level 5, the fact that you managed to get there is a miracle. But you would have come across them and been like, no, thank you. Just turn around. And you don't even get the benefit of walking near something that makes you go, no, thank you. I'm gonna go home now.
Yeah, level
Because
scaling is kind of taken that away, hasn't it?
yeah, or it's just that certain things are completely inaccessible until you reach that point through questing, keying, and all this other stuff. It's like, why don't you let people walk in, find out that this is hardcore for where they are right now in their personal progression, and then talk to other people about it, because that's going to spread the word, and then all of a sudden these higher level people are going to go there and wanting to see what's what, and it causes a ripple effect in the community. And a lot of these newer games, they honestly do not care about their community. It's just you cater to the single person to get them to play as long as they can, maybe squeeze a couple bucks out of them extra, and then just rinse and repeat until they finally get wise to it and go to another game. At that point, you just start another expansion to get them excited again.
There was a really interesting interview that I did, and this has been years ago now. I want to say back in like 2016. We were interviewing this trio of brothers to potentially come on and join at the time, to join the Saga team. And I remember one of the questions that they asked during the interview was, well, what kind of content is there going to be in your game? And I said, well, there's no quest hubs, there's none of this, and this, and I pointed at EverQuest, and none of them had ever played EverQuest. They had played World of Warcraft, and so their idea of progression was about quest hubs and fetch quests and quests telling you what to do and how to do it, and my version was EverQuest style, where you're given the rusty sword and you're let loose, and that's where I feel that that's where truly emergent gameplay comes from, because it's the community determining what kind of content they want to do, whether it's we're going to go grind and crush bone, or we're going to go craft, or we're going to go over here to do unrest, or whatever the case may be. But it's up to the community to figure that out. And there was this disconnect in that conversation of, well, that's not content. If there's no quests, you don't have any content in your game. And I completely beg to differ, because it's like a good D&D campaign. You can have everything planned out and all your campaign objectives ready to go, and a roll of the dice or the whim of a player at the table can completely send that campaign off over here, and you have no plans for that. So it's like you're just rolling the dice at that point and just figuring out as you go along. And I think that's the beauty of open world sandbox games. And I think that's probably one of the things that draws all of us to a game like EverQuest, because you have the freedom to just decide. Obviously, there were epic quests which you could do, and there were massive quest chains that could take months. It took me 2 years to do my Ranger epics. Now, if I was in a hardcore raid guild, maybe I could have done that in like 3 months. But I was in a roleplay guild which had a raid alliance, so we only raided like twice a week. Excuse me, hiccups. And so it took me 2 years to get my Ranger epics. But when I finally got my epics for my Ranger, that 2 year journey felt fucking epic. Like
Right.
truly epic.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's you have a fulfilling experience when you have to figure some things out. Doesn't matter the pace. It really, really doesn't. Because here's the thing, like it's just I got a problem with people who are like to brag about world firsts. Okay, I got a lot of world firsts, or sorry, server firsts in my raiding guild for Classic and then Velius. Do you think anybody that played on that server remembers besides the people that were in the raid? I bet you half of them don't even remember. No, it literally doesn't matter. Literally doesn't matter. But I can talk to anyone from one of my old guilds, and I can talk about a time that we wiped in a group, in a raid, or whatever, and they remember that perfectly because it was funny. It was fun. It was different. No one cares that it's like, oh, you killed the avatar of war. You're the first ones on the server to do it. Yeah, but remember that time when we were fighting when all of a sudden these giants came back because our monk got lost? You know, it's like, oh my God, yes. And then you had a 2-hour conversation with these guys talking about how this one guy made a mistake and killed everybody.
Bad pull.
Yeah, bad pull. Or, I mean, just the weirdest things create the most memorable events in games. Like, I can tell you the exact raid where I met my wife, where on the server at the time, apparently I had a bit of a reputation of being a good tank, even though it was my alt. And I literally kept my warrior at 51 for probably 6 months to help a friend of mine get his white scale from Vox. That's all it was. So I was there religiously every time he raided. And she asked if it would be okay if she tried to tank Vox. And I said, absolutely, go for it. She's like, really? It's like, yeah, everyone should have a chance. No one else wants to do it, so I'm here to do it. And she did it. She died. I grabbed Vox from her when she died. And she felt so embarrassed, and we still laugh about that. I'm like, and I thought she did great. you know, and she was just like, I was at my computer. I almost had tears running down my face because I was so embarrassed that I died. It's like everybody thought you did great. You know, I mean, she was a paladin, so there's something to be said about the fact that she lasted more than one hit. Sorry,
Yes,
I'm
there's some, there's something to say about that though. Everybody can go at their own pace, which is good. I
yeah,
mean, if you want the server first, there's a team for that. They can do that. They can go, that atmosphere and be the server first. And then there's
right.
like people like you and me that sit back a little bit and you know wait maybe a
Yeah,
couple months later than server
yeah. I
first.
mean, I've got a bit of a unique experience of being on a lot of different sides of different fences
Mm,
because I started EverQuest as a raider. I
mm,
mean, we were the first on my server to break into Fear and to Hate, to take down Avatar of War. But then when I retired from that server and went to a new one to kind of just take it easy, we joined a guild, me and some friends of us, and all they did was they wanted to do all the raids in order. I'm like, that's great. I wasn't the raid leader. They were doing strats that were never going to work, but that was fine. I let them try it. I didn't step on anybody's toes. And I was like, hey, it was worth a shot. And I still remember that we were, because back in the day, you had to go to the forums and you had to sign out raid zones. We signed out Vextal. Love that zone. Oh
That's
my
a great
god,
zone.
favorite zone. I even enjoyed the keying quest,
It was
but
long, but it was
it
amazing.
was long, but it was fun. And everyone was like, "Why are you signing this out?" We're at like Gates of Discord era and stuff, and we're just like, because it's a fun place. We want to go see it, and no one I mean, people gave us a lot of flack over that, and it's like, and I was confused. Like, why would it bother these people that we're doing older raids? It doesn't make any sense. I think the community shifted in a very weird way to where we went from everybody being of the community, everybody there's obviously some smack talk, but the usual like sports smack talk. We're like, oh, this guy sucks. Ha ha ha. He can't catch me. But we went from that and overall being a generally positive community to now it's like everybody against everybody, and it's really weird, at least to me,
And there's
because also go
no, no,
ahead.
you go ahead. I didn't. Yeah, my bad.
I would say because this leads into cases where you have people who obviously have hundreds of hours in a game. You see a new player ask a question, you're like, "Oh, you're a bleepity bleeping idiot! Get that
Mm.
bleepity bleep out of here!" And it's like, okay, you've got hundreds of hours in this game. You obviously care about it. You obviously love it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have spent 300 hours in the game to get where you are. Why would you scare away people from this game, costing them money, and eventually getting it shut down because your attitude is infectious and his experience is going to be spread to his friends. So you're not just costing us one player, you're costing us potentially hundreds of players. For what reason? To make yourself feel like a big person? In a world that doesn't really exist? That we're all technically on the same side? It confuses me to no end.
My brother and we should probably have him on the show at some point. His problem is he doesn't have enough free time. But the what you just explained, he tried many years to get into World of Warcraft. So I got him into MMOs, starting with Lord of the Rings Online back in 2010, and then he went from there to Star Wars: The Old Republic, and then him and his college buddies decided they wanted to try World of Warcraft. Tried for years to get into that game, and he never was able to do it because every single time he tried to play, he'd get a couple weeks into the game, he'd level up a character, get to the point where he's ready to go start doing the dungeons, and then he'd get into a dungeon group, and he would get booted from all of the groups because he wasn't doing enough deeps. And it's like there's no there's no room for being a newbie the way there used to be room for being a newbie. And
Mm-hmm.
I've even seen this the first time I tried Final Fantasy 14, which is probably 3 4 years ago, more like 4 years ago. I think it was like don't really remember. It doesn't matter. 4 years ago or so, before they've made all the changes to Realm Reborn and everything. Um, I tried it, and you get to the point where back then Um, I think they've changed it now where everyone has to watch the cutscenes when you go into a dungeon. But back when I played it, everyone had the option to either watch it or skip it. But the frustrating part was people who have already done the dungeon 10 times skip it because they don't want to watch the cutscene. And I came into the game after it had been out for, 4 years or whatever, and I'm playing it and I'm wanting to watch the cutscenes and I'm trying to follow the storyline and be involved in the game and immerse myself in that environment. And invariably, I found like that probably one out of every three dungeons I would join, it's like 30% of the time, people would start bitching in group chat that I was taking too long because they were trying to hit their dailies. So they're in there trying to just boom, get that dungeon done in 15 minutes. I'm wanting to watch the cutscenes. I get done with the cutscene. They're complaining that I watched the cutscene. Then I'm like wandering around the zone going, I've got these 10 quests I want to do. And they're like, we don't care about the quest. We just want to get the daily done so that we get the credit and move on to the next one. And I'm like, but I need to go over here. And what about this? And then I'm over here taking screenshots because it's like, this art's really cool. And I love this asset. And oh my God, look at this vista. And I'm like enjoying the video game. And they're like gone, like down a side
Yep.
corridor. And I'm like, where'd everybody go? And they're like, boot,
Yep.
and it's like, I gave up on Final Fantasy
I
14
mean,
the first time
I've been
because of that.
tanking for what, like 22 years now. Actually, no, 20, yeah, 22 years. I've been tanking for 22 years. Raid tanking, group tank, all of it. Now, when I played Final Fantasy 14 for the first time, this was A Realm Reborn. Um, I was a marauder, so I could be a warrior. And it was the first time in the very first dungeon. And there's a spot where you can go left, but it's a dead, or sorry, you can go right, but it's a dead end. And I went right. And they're like, what the fuck are you doing? I'm like, I want to see what's down here. Like, it's a dead end, idiot. And I'm like,
So,
well, excuse me. Or they would be like, they would complain that I'm like level 15 or something and I don't have the freaking gear because I have to get it in this zone to tank half the zone at once. It's like, what do you want from me? You tell me to pull more, I pull two extra. I die. You tell me to stop pulling so many. So I pulled two. And now you tell me to go faster. It's just like, it's a good thing it's online because I'd have slapped the shit out of some people. Because, I mean, I've been in their shoes. I understand. You've got time. You want to get this crap out of the way because the way the games are designed, you have to do these things. If you want to stay close to your friends, you have to do them, which, in my opinion, terrible design. Dailies, lazy.
yeah.
But anyway, and that causes animosity towards anyone who's not on the same level as you. That's not what these games are about.
I saw something interesting in the Defend the Night Discord the other day. One of the community questions that had come up. I don't remember which question it was. It might have been about the um, things you've done good and things you've done
Oh,
bad. I really don't remember which one it was now. I don't think it was that one. I think it was one of the ones before. But somebody had come in and they were talking about the DPS thing, and somebody was commenting that they like to be able to play at the level where if someone comes into their group and doesn't have the DPS to be in that group, then it's yeah, unfortunately we don't want you because you're not good enough. And the other people in that commentary were taking that, in my opinion, took it the wrong way and were like, well, you're being an elitist prick. And it's like, I don't think that's the right way to look at it because there's so many different, Jesse, you were touching on this earlier, there's so many different ways to play games and levels to play because I'm in the same boat in that I have a very similar background to you, Lexer, in that um, my first couple years were just as a casual guild, roleplay guild rating, but then I got very much into it and world first, server first by the time we were into Everquest 2 and then Vanguard and so on and so forth. And when you're playing at that level and you're focused on that level, then you need other people that are doing this. And I think one of the previous Mondays in MMORPG episodes was about this, where if I like my wife and I like to ride bikes, but we are not, we're definitely weekend warriors. We like to go to the park and ride bicycles at the park on a Saturday afternoon and just go have a picnic and that's it. And then there's people who ride bikes for exercise and they do it, 3 times a week. And then there's people who train for races and marathons or whatever and triathlons and they'll ride every single day. And then there's people who compete and then there's the Olympic level, so there's like 10 different tiers of people, and you can never look at someone and say, you don't see, I don't think I've ever seen Olympic athletes going around saying you suck because you only like to ride your bike to the park on Saturdays and you suck because of that. But in games, we've seen that sometimes where people can get a little bit weird in terms of the aggressiveness of you're not good enough. But oftentimes I feel like it's probably a miscommunication in that it's not that you're not good enough, it's just that
You
you
need to
haven't
find
put
your own
this.
lane. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Well, see,
haven't.
that's the thing. It
Yeah,
really is a miscommunication because a lot of people do put it that way. You're not good enough,
Mhm.
but that's not.
that's
In a
not
lot
really
of
what they
cases, that's
mean.
not what they mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's usually a you're not where you need to be to play at this level yet.
Mm.
Now you can go off about political correctness and kids gloves and stuff, but fact of the matter is, in text, a lot of context is lost, and those extra words are absolutely needed. Because I've gotten messages from people that have absolutely triggered me to the point where I want to put a fist through my monitor. But then I talk to the person like 2 days afterwards, and they're like, you know, I had nothing malicious to say. They're just like, it was just, I'm sorry if it came across malicious. It wasn't meant that way. And I'm like, huh, why did I assume it was malicious? Because that's the way the community or these communities are being shifted, whether it be through design or whatever, or just the way society is. We won't get that deep into it, but
You're
a
giving me
lot of people,
ideas for another episode now.
it's what I do. But a lot of people just need to realize that on the other side of that digital character is another person. You can
Mhm.
be this complete asshole and basically be out for only you, at which case if the game dies in the future, you have to accept the fact, even though I know they won't, that you had a hand in it dying. Big or small, you had a hand in it. But if you take, like, let's say for instance someone joins and uses an LFG tool like in WoW, and someone's not up to snuff, is it really that big of a deal if you take 20-30 minutes out of your time to help this player understand what's going on, to help them set them on the path to become a member of your tier?
That's a
Because if you do, think of it this way: you've got more pool to pull from. You've got more players that are able to play on your level the way you want to play, versus less and less and less.
it's just that brought up an interesting thought in my mind when you were talking about that, about from a design standpoint. Some games have changed this, but a lot of the older games, um, everything was very much broken into tiers. And because of that, if you wanted to help someone, here's an example of this. I look at Everquest. Everquest, if you were beyond like 5 or 6 levels or whatever the equation is, it's like 5 levels times whatever. But if you were outside of that, the reason for grouping with that person, the mechanics punished you in terms of experience points because that low level person was no longer getting experience points. Whereas when we were doing the power leveling thing the other night when we were playing in Dark Age of Camelot, level 1 joined a group with a level 50, and everybody's getting XP at the same time. And similarly with like Lord of the Rings Online, you can have a level 1 join a big group and you can go off and do quests together. There's two things about that, because on the one hand, those games make it very easy for people to come together, which is not a bad thing. But looking back at the way EverQuest did it, if you went out of your way to help someone, you were doing it because you were literally doing it to benefit them. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't about everyone benefiting. It was literally you going out of your way to make sure that that person gets the benefit, because you're not sharing experience points. It's like the level 10 guy needs help doing this thing. You're all level 40, but you take time out of your schedule as a community to go help that level 10 get his quest completed and everything else. That aspect has been lost, I think, in this mechanics where everyone wins, everyone can join together, everyone gets XP at the same time. And there is something to be said, I think, I'm just pontificating at this point. There is something to be said about mechanics that focus on community. And this
Hmm.
spins back around to looking at EverQuest, and what got us all involved in MMORPGs in the beginning was because we felt like we were part of an online community, and that
Yeah.
gave us that social interaction that we wanted, and people taking the time to come help us, even though they weren't directly benefiting themselves. I think that's something that's been lost in today's gaming environment.
Oh, absolutely. Because I remember lots of cases in EverQuest where it didn't happen while I was the leader of a raiding guild because that was my angry years. I just try to forget those as best I can. But I remember when you would see in OOC a raid group got wiped going into fear.
Mm,
It's a common occurrence. That was a hard place to break into.
hmm
And you would see this top tier raiding guild be like, we're not due to raid for like an hour. We're all coming over to help you. And we're like, wait, what? These are top tier competitive raiders on this server. And we've even seen multiple competitive guilds come together to help these kind of people. They would literally band together, even though they're competitors, and help someone that they have no ties to whatsoever. And looking back at that, you're like, why can't we do this now? Because the EverQuest community, don't get me wrong, I love the game, but there's a lot of things that didn't do right. And fortunately, community is one of the things they did right. Because when you got into a good circle of people, it was fantastic. I mean, you could literally ask for help and they will help you. They give you the shirt off their back.
How often did you guys, between the two of you, like, did you ever no life it, like playing for 24 hours? I mean,
Um,
what were your
I
average play
once
times?
I once did a 72-hour raid where people had to come in shifts.
Okay.
So yeah, I know life did quite frequently.
Yeah, I did a lot of no lifing, especially on the weekends. There could be some. I mean, I could get off 5 o'clock and just not sleep the whole weekend.
I had a few of those. I think my
Um,
longest straight session was 19 hours of just without a break. Like, not necessarily, I took a break after that and then went and got some food, but like I didn't take a break for 19 hours other than to like get up and go to the bathroom. And it was grinding through 45 when it was a hell level outside of Karnor's castle, just pulling the Drollvargs and spiders, just
Yeah.
like, and we had, half
Northeast
a
ruins.
yeah, literally, and like it was the West Ruins or whatever it was, and like half a dozen people cycled through the group over that period of time. But I was the ranger, and so I was just chain pulling nonstop. But you just said I remember in EverQuest 2, because we got server first for the Peacock raids in the second expansion, the Desert Flames, I think, and because that was before they had persistent zones. So we literally zoned everybody in, spent about 6 hours trying to break the raid, and then we had a rotation of 6 people who kept their characters logged into the zone to keep it open. And then they took shifts. There was always 3 people logged in, so that if someone's connection went down, someone else was still there to keep the zone open. And then we came back over the next 2 nights and eventually cleared that zone and got our epic 2.0s. I don't think I ever did that for EverQuest 1 though. That was the first time I ever did that in EverQuest 2, and that was a weekend thing. We started on Friday night and we had finished it by Sunday night. And these days everything's persistent, so you can go in and you can, you've got 7 days, say, to clear the zone. That was the night I remember doing all the mythical raiding in the Kunark expansion in EverQuest 2, and by that point it had switched over to persistent, and it was great because we had like I don't know 8 days or something to clear, but the zones were freaking massive. I mean, you're talking you've got like 30 boss mobs. And so it's like one night you're clearing this wing and you're killing like 7 boss mobs. Next night you're clearing this wing and killing 5 boss mobs. Next night you're doing this wing and you're just working yourself wing through wing, finally getting to like the 10th wing of the zone or whatever. And I don't know.
mhm.
There's some
There's always something to say about a dungeon that saves your progress when you
yeah.
go through it. Not a lot of games do that. EverQuest didn't do that. So that's interesting that you brought that up. I'd like to experiment with that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good thing to think about because I remember when Warcraft started doing it, EverQuest 2 started doing it, and it was great because it let us be rating on a more relaxed schedule 'cause instead of having to worry about, okay, we got to be here for 10 hours tonight until we beat this. It was, oh well, we could do 3 hours tonight, and then we'll come back on Thursday and do another 3 hours, and then we'll come back on Saturday and do another 3 hours, and you could break up your raids into like manageable chunks of time as opposed to needing to be logged in for 10 hours or do the rotations like Lexer was saying.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah, because I remember being in like Chardock for like days, uh, trying to get through that zone, and it'd be nice just to go back to it and then just save progress in a certain corner. Your whole raid team's there. That'd be nice instead of having to break it in every
every
time.
time. um,
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of persistent zones if they're big. Like you think about most of those dungeons that are in like World of Warcraft. We did a man, this has probably been back in like 2016. I did a Twitch experiment um, because I was talking about, when we were first starting to talk about Saga Leukemia publicly, I was talking about dungeons that can last for weeks, and I got a lot of people who were like, "That's bullshit." How is that? That's just not true because they're thinking World of Warcraft dungeons that you can run in 15 minutes, and even at their peak, it might take 2 or 3 hours. And I'm like, so I did an experiment and we logged on and we did P99 and we went at level 7 and went straight to Befallen. And then over the next, like, I think it was 2 months, we did 2 months. We played twice a week and we never left Befallen. We did 2 times a week sessions, and we went from level 7 to level like 22, 23 or something like at that in that dungeon, but we never left. It was just like one session we're in this corner, and then the next session we've progressed to the back corner and we're getting keys for everybody to get past the door. And then the third session we're getting to the drop off, and then we're there at the drop off for like 2 sessions, and then we're getting the keys for the next section. And it was like we finished up this 2 month thing, and I was like, look, we just spent 2 months in an EverQuest 1 dungeon. So don't tell me that you can't have dungeons that take weeks to months to clear. But the
Yeah,
caveat to that,
you have to log out safely and all that
yes,
other stuff. That's
yes,
that's kind of a pit
it is. And
in.
there's caveats to that as well, because it's also not only do you have to re-clear every time, because there's no safe zones in those dungeons. You got to gate out or get out and then come back in and clear your way back down the next time. But also just the way those games were designed, once you know it, if you go back again and you know exactly what you're supposed to do and you're playing it in say the modern version, because if you think about the when you first went in there back in like 99, there were no maps. No one knew what mobs dropped the keys or anything like that, so it was very much explore, figure it out. And now we're spending, you said Chardock. I can remember Karnor's castle, and we spent my memory tells me that I spent 3 months in there with our guild. I don't know how good my memory is because there was a lot of weed smoked during those days. But I remember spending a lot of time just, we started in the right or left side, then we made it to the first tower, and then you made it to the first courtyard, and then, it was every week we were in a different place, and then we would spend the week in that one place getting like another level so that we could push to the next part. And I remember spending like 3 months in that one dungeon before I ever went off and explored Chardock and the mines and, all of the other places like Warsack Woods and the giant fort. And there was, something to be said for the way
And
that,
you didn't have the markers, the big
no,
exclamation points triggering you to go this way, or you didn't see them on the map to try to divert you in another direction. It was all just exploring,
yes,
which for
there
me is just
was,
so cool.
there's a funny story I have from one of the times we tried the Avatar, went into their offices a couple times and hung out. And Chris, who's the lead guy on it now, and when they first implemented, like, I think it was the compass. Yeah, it was when they first implemented the compass into the game and a waypoint thing on the compass. He said all of a sudden they had this, they're tracking all this data, and there was basically just this place in a zone where there was a drop off, and it was a big enough drop that people would fall and die. And once they added that waypoint in, people would put this quest in that. There was this one quest in that zone, as I recall, and they would put the tracker on, and they just would beeline, and they just ended up with this massive pile of corpses at the bottom of this pit because people were just only paying attention to the focus point on their compass and not paying attention to the environment, and they were just like on auto run. And I think that that's one of the reasons I never wanted to put a compass or waypoints or a mini map or anything like that into Saga. I don't know what you guys are doing with Defend the Night, but I'm a big fan of that. No, it's open. Figure it
Yeah.
out. It's a
We're still playing with a couple ideas.
yeah.
It's like a GPS. It's like people driving it into a pond or something. It just that kind of
Take it
aspect.
right here. Oh, look,
Take
I'm
it
in a
right.
farmer's field now.
So
Well,
it's the same kind of idea.
I had a good conversation about GPS one time. So my wife's never driven. She's my age and she's never driven a vehicle, doesn't have a driver's license or anything like that. Whereas I grew up in a pre-GPS world, and especially working construction for all those years, you would often get notes over the phone. Drive 2.3 miles, look for the White House with blue trim. Turn right, go 3 quarter of a mile. Turn left when you see the red mailbox. That kind of stuff. And so I grew up having to learn to navigate by people's weird directions. And I don't know if this is true. This is just my take on it. I love my wife to death, and she knows that I joke about this a lot of times. So I have the freedom to say this. I promise you. She
Oh,
might come in and smack me, but it's a joke smack. She has no navigation skills, none. Like, so we've done a lot of travel um, with Marginal Boundaries in our travel brand, and you're in new cities, new countries. You don't speak the language. I'm very good about we go somewhere, I can get us back to the hotel without any sort of map or anything else. And whereas she can't. Her brain doesn't work the same way mine does in the sense of picking up landscapes. And I swear that it's a trained skill because learning how to drive like that, where you were having to look at landmarks, which I swear also translates into games. That's one of the reasons why to this day I can log into Everquest without any maps, and I can tell you exactly how to get from point A to point B in a zone without any compass or with anything else because I remember the landmarks. But I think there's something to be said for people who learned to navigate without that, because the moment you turn on a GPS, you don't need to use your brain. It's just follow the waypoint, whether it's right or wrong, and then you're there. It's a weird.
yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way. I can pretty navigate everything, but you get me in a Nagy's lair, and sometimes I don't know where I'm at. That zone, some
You get
reason,
a pass on that one.
mm,
It's a lot of twists and
I can
turns in there.
I don't know
Yeah.
what it is. I just every time I get in, I'm like, I don't know where I'm at. Every time, and that's pre-map. I mean, now you kind of see the maps in EverQuest now, but that was before they had all that
Oh,
pertness,
as a
quality of
side
life.
note, am I the only one that misses like the old EverQuest habit of actually drawing your maps and putting them in a binder?
I love that. I
God, that was such an accomplishment when you got like like every zone you've been to, you got to like the plastic sheets and everything. You got you got your numbers basically of this is positive, this is negative, and you're like you go / Loke.
look.
I'm right here.
It was a navigation system, and once you knew how to use it, it was brilliant because you could mark a camp, you could mark a tree, you could mark anything, and other people who knew how to use that loc, it was a brilliant system. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm
That's
torn.
like a whole level of dedication.
Yes, it is. I love
I mean, my
maps.
wife still has her maps upstairs on a bookshelf.
I don't have mine. My binders, who knows, in a move somewhere, I no longer have mine. But I have a friend of mine who I've one of these online friends that I've known since like 2006 from the Netherlands, and he actually, I think I put it up on my Facebook even a couple months back because it showed up in my memories from like 7 years ago on Facebook, and he had shared like 7 years ago, like he's got this like 3 inch thick binder from his EverQuest days that's just full of all that stuff, and that's the one. I can't say that's one regret I have is I don't have my old EverQuest notebooks and stuff like that. Those got lost somewhere in a move. Um, somewhere along the way of going from 19 to 41, those disappeared somewhere. Um, anyway, we're about an hour in now, a little bit over an hour. I figure that's probably good for our first introductory episode. Do you guys have anything you want to add? Final thoughts while we're sitting here?
No, that's pretty good.
Yeah, so I pretty much say it when it comes to my mind.
Cool. All right. Well, for those of you following along, these episodes are going to be coming out on Mondays, obviously. Thus, the title of the show, Mondays in MMORPGs. Make sure you check the description text below for all the links to these guys and their various projects. We're going to put all that information below to their game, and if you guys want, your personal social media channels and so on and so forth. And stick around for the next episode, which will be coming at you next Monday, and we will be talking about something else fun. We've got a good 15 to 20 episodes, I think, already outlined, and we're just going to plug ahead, talk about fun stuff. So make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, follow these guys everywhere you can follow them. Check out Defend the Night, join their Discord, all that good stuff. We will see everybody in the next episode.